Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
On a frigid Wednesday evening in February, I drove up to the cottage I had inherited. I had taken the week off to complete dealing with my father's inheritance after he died after years of worsening health. He didn't leave anything behind, other than my grandfather's old hunting home in western Oregon. Over 4 months later, I had finally paid his outstanding debts and was driving to the cabin at 10:45 a.m., hoping for a respite from the long days I'd endured. The trip up turned into a snowy excursion as heavy flakes began to fall, covering the road with roughly 8 inches by the time I arrived at the turnoff. But when I approached the property, I observed something peculiar. The gate was open, the chain lock was removed, and new tire tracks went into the property, but none exited. My initial assumption was that it was probably some local burglars taking advantage of the unoccupied property. I examined my phone and was surprised to see that I had service. I called 911, and the operator told me that she would send a couple of units straight immediately. She instructed me to wait for them and suggested that I block the gate with my vehicle and locate a secure location. So I drove in, turned off the engine, and waited, thinking about how few people were aware this cabin existed. The region was primarily federal forest, with deep wildness and no hunting season. Furthermore, wildlife such as foxes, beavers, and coyotes had been trapped out decades before. Before I could get buried in contemplation, the flashing lights of the county sheriff's cruisers appeared down the road. I moved my vehicle to allow them pass. The deputies drew up alongside me and confirmed that I was the one who had phoned. I described how I came to the open gate, cut lock, and fresh vehicle tracks heading into the property. I said that whomever had broken in must still be there since there was no other way in or out. The 2 sheriff's vehicles crept down the 600 yards to the cabin, and I followed closely behind. A vehicle was parked alongside the cottage, and the person inside seemed unconcerned about our approach. The deputies phoned in an update, stating that the cabin door revealed traces of forced entry. Then, just as they concluded the conversation, a man and a woman emerged from the cabin, attempting to carry a gun safe between them. When the deputies questioned them, the guy put up a brave face, claiming they had every right to be there since the land belonged to the lady. They hadn't spotted me until I stepped up, and the instant they saw me, all the confidence left their faces. I could not believe it. The invaders turned out to be my former business partner and ex-girlfriend. Let me introduce myself. My name is Alexander, or Alex for short, Smith. I am 37 years old, divorced, and I own and work for a bank equipment firm. My employment mostly entails installing and maintaining technology such as drive-through systems found in local banks and credit unions. I am also one of the company proprietors. I don't have any children, but my ex-girlfriend has a little daughter, which is part of how this narrative evolves. I met Sophia Mitchell on a trip returning from San Diego. At the age of 29, I was going home from the military after serving 6 years as a radio repairman. During my time in service, I completed an online degree in electronics with a minor in computer security. I'd completed 2 deployments in the Middle East and was ready to quit the service. Sophia happened to be sitting opposite me on that trip, and we began up a discussion. I discovered that she was the youngest in her family and was on her way back to Seattle after a shopping vacation in San Diego. We got along well, and we continued to converse even as I retrieved my duffel and barracks bags from the baggage carousel. Sophia asked if her driver could take me someplace, but before I could respond, my father arrived. After greetings and a short exchange of numbers, I departed with my father, thinking it was a lovely meeting but probably over. I hadn't intended on phoning her, and I honestly didn't believe she'd ever call me back. Around 10 days later, I was at my father's home when the phone rang. He gave it to me, explaining that it was for me. I was interested since I hadn't reconnected with anybody from high school. To my amazement, it was Sophia on the phone. She immediately lashed out at me, moaning about how I had not phoned her. Before she could get too far into her diatribe, I interrupted her off, stating, "I did not call you, and if you are going to be rude about it, this conversation is over." I said goodbye and hung up, believing that was the end of it. Later that week, I went out with several high school friends to a downtown pub. While getting some beverages, I observed a ruckus in one part of the room. I turned to see 2 men encircling a young lady who was plainly attempting to flee. They seemed to be having a good time, and the bouncers did nothing except stand about. As the kind man I had always been, I motioned to my buddies, stepped up, and tapped the larger of the 2 men on the shoulder. I said, "Are you generally a bullying jerk, or is this simply a particular occasion? If it is always, we will find a cause for you to stop, or you may go." If it's just tonight, walk away and cool off. He looked at me as if I'd grown a third eye and sneered, listen here, you little jerk, after we're done with this woman, I'm going to pound you so deep into the ground, you'll need a week to dig yourself out. The big guy looked over his shoulder, noticing my 4 friends standing behind me, and his confidence visibly wavered. He gulped, muttering to his buddy, let's get out of here, this jerk ruined all the fun. Anyway, he turned back to the girl and sneered, listen, if you're not going to play, don't take drinks from guys. Before he could leave, I grabbed his arm and pressed down hard on his elbow joint, hitting the nerve right where it would affect his hand. I moved up close and discreetly said, how about you apologize to the lady? If you do, maybe you'll regain sensation in your hand. Otherwise, it'll grip harder, and you won't be able to pick up a pencil for a month. He gulped hard and murmured to the girl, sorry, suppose I had too much to drink. Then he and his companion hastily fled. I went to check on the girl, and to my amazement, she said, mind your own business. I could have handled it. I recognized Sophia and couldn't help but grin. When I had gathered my breath, I said, I see your manners have improved. Do us both a favor and delete my father's phone number. I won't be coming around any longer. Maybe after charm school, you'll learn not to irritate people. Then I turned to my friends and said, I'm leaving, guys, the company over here is a bit too toxic for my liking. See you later. I drove back to my father's place, angry. After a sleepless night, I came into the kitchen the next morning to find Sophia seated at the table speaking with my father. I instantly turned around, returned to my room, put on some outdoor clothing, and strolled out the front door to cool off. After an hour, I returned to find the home vacant, but there was a note on the kitchen table for my father, instructing me to phone her. I phoned her, and she immediately began scolding me about my supposed lack of politeness. I stopped her off and said, I'm going to pack my belongings and stay in a hotel until I find my own place. Do not inform anybody where I go. I'll call you when I'm situated and have a new automobile. Then maybe you can apologize for getting involved where you aren't needed. I was furious. This was the type of wrath that made you want to toss everything out, even the baby in the bathwater. As I packed, the phone rang repeatedly, but I ignored it. When I was ready, I ordered a taxi and booked into a Best Western on the other side of town. After I settled down, I called a couple of friends and asked for the name of a vehicle salesperson they suggested as fair and honest. Because of my time in the military and the lack of spending alternatives in the desert, I had saved the majority of my income. I contacted the auto salesperson my friends advised and discovered he worked at a neighboring Honda dealership. I told him what I was looking for, and he said that they had a couple of pilots and CR Versys that would be suitable. Because the dealership was nearby, I headed over to check it out. He showed me a 2-year-old pilot in elite trim and a 3-year-old basic pilot. The CR Versys on the lot were a touch too nice for my tastes, but I appreciated the size. Then he responded, I have a companion dealership across town with a plain Jane CRV that might work for you. The only catch is that it's a really bright yellow, which no one seems to desire. Do you want to go check it out? I'll drive so I don't have to share the commission. He laughed, and we drove away in his vehicle. The CRV was as basic as they come, yet it had all of the features I needed. The yellow was undeniably loud, yet it did not annoy me. I merely wanted dependable mobility with 4-wheel drive for Michigan's winters. I haggled him down to a reasonable amount and paid a deposit. Then I brought the automobile to a friend's garage to get it inspected. He guaranteed it would be ready in the early afternoon, so I went to a neighboring eatery for lunch. When I completed lunch and returned to the shop, my buddy gave me a thumbs up for the car's condition, but he suggested I acquire more aggressive tires for the winter. I returned the CRV to the dealer, spoke with the salesperson, and he arranged for me to get a set of mud and snow tires, including the wheels, from a nearby tire company. Because I didn't have a permanent residence yet, the tire company volunteered to store the tires for a week. After settling the sale and arranging for temporary tags, I drove back to the hotel, knowing that transportation was arranged. Before I could begin looking for a home to rent, all I needed were civilian clothing and a mobile phone. The following morning, I went to Walmart and picked up some necessities, including a tracking phone. Then I left the hotel with a newspaper and a local real estate directory to look for an apartment. I went to a couple complexes and duplexes, but nothing seemed right. While traveling through some of my favorite areas, I saw a for rent sign on a property in a peaceful location. I contacted the number shown on the placard and left a message. My phone rang just as I began driving away. It was the landlord. He stated he could meet me at my place in 5 minutes since he lived just a few streets away. I turned back to wait. When the landlord came, we exchanged introductions, and he indicated that he was looking to sell the home. It was completely furnished, which, according to his realtor, made it more difficult to sell. Buying a property was not on my radar, but it seemed to be in excellent condition from the exterior. As we strolled into the home and around the yard, I was amazed with the condition. The furniture was not my style, but it was livable. When I inquired about the rent, he gave a fee that was far cheaper than what I had seen in the complexes or duplexes I had viewed. He also said that the first year's rent may be used as a down payment if I opted to purchase. When I inquired about the selling price, he mentioned a number that I could afford and offered to incorporate it in the lease agreement if I wanted to purchase later. We shook hands, he handed me his lawyer's contact information, and I set up an appointment for the following morning. Back at the motel, I contacted my father's home and left a message including my new mobile phone number. Still angered by his interference, I begged him to keep the phone number secret and only call if he swore not to interfere again. It may seem harsh, but my father was still attempting to govern my life, which is one of the main reasons I joined the military in the first place. At 29, as a seasoned veteran, I didn't need a babysitter or someone continually providing unwanted advice. I got a job at a local electronics business and finally purchased the home I had been renting. My father and I reconciled, and I discovered that when Sophia paid him a visit, she wanted to apologize and thank me for stepping in to assist her at the bar. I contacted Sophia, accepted her apology, and went on. Then, while on a repair visit for a nearby company whose security system's video recorder was malfunctioning, I had an unexpected experience. The receptionist welcomed me and summoned the security director, Sophia, who arrived dressed professionally. She walked me to the security setup and demonstrated the defective recorder. After approximately 10 minutes, I noticed someone had attempted to remedy a non-existent issue by crossing a few wires. Sophia was glad that the problem had been handled and asked if I would be willing to meet for lunch later. I agreed and looked forward to it. Following that meal, we started dating and dated for approximately 6 months before I asked Sophia to marry me. She consented, but noted that there were a few factors that may complicate matters. Her family controlled not just the shop where I saw her, but numerous others around the county. She also informed me that her father, whom she addressed as father rather than dad, forced her to get a prenuptial agreement before marriage. I told Sophia that money didn't matter to me and that if the prenuptial agreement was fair, I was okay with it. She was puzzled as to how I could reject money so lightly. I emphasized that I was healthy, had a well-paying job, a home, a vehicle, and all I needed to live comfortably. I questioned her why it was so vital to have more money than you really needed, and whether luxuries were so important that collecting them became the primary aim. She acknowledged she was unsure since she had always had money. While she was less concerned with rank and wealth than her mother, she did appreciate the finer things in life. We agreed on an 8-month engagement. Sophia's parents, however, were not supportive of our marriage. Her mother felt I was beneath them, while her father assumed I was pursuing their money. The tension reached a peak at a Sunday meal at their residence. They brought a young guy from one of their businesses, someone with their social standing, and the three of them started making subtle, sarcastic comments about my employment. I put up with it for about 20 minutes when the young guy made a remark about my parents, implying that they must not have been very good if I had to join the military to attend college. That settled it for me. I was upset, but I was clever enough not to show it. I spoke quietly to everyone at the table. If you think I'm not good enough for your daughter based on the conversation happening here, then I agree with you, I told you. That being said, I was raised to treat family like guests and guests like family. I turned to Sophia and said, if you want to stay engaged to me, don't ever invite me back here again. I asked for my ring back, took it, and walked out. I never returned to their home. Sophia subsequently informed me that the remainder of the day was spent yelling, and the person from the company had said enough to be ejected out. She came over to my house later and said we could be married in Vegas if that was what it required. I returned her ring, and we kissed later that night. Things calmed down after that, and her father contacted me about the prenup. I instructed him to email me a copy of his plan, which I would evaluate. If it was equitable for both of us, I would sign it. If I didn't understand anything, I would consult a lawyer. If it wasn't fair, I would make a counterproposal. We may either embrace one or the other or strike a compromise. I made it plain that I didn't care about their money and recommended that the best option would be to place all of Sophia's assets in a trust before the wedding. Then I encountered another difficulty. Sophia's father issued me a prenup that was absurdly one-sided and would have put me in a bad position if we ever split. I brought it to a lawyer, who helped me prepare two alternative versions. One was as unjust to Sophia as the one her father sent me. The other was a lot more balanced arrangement that protected both Sophia's families and my personal assets, which included my home, business equipment, and money. The fair plan declared that, save in circumstances of adultery or marital abuse, all assets gained during the marriage would be divided equally between the two partners. If the divorce was caused by infidelity or abuse, the wounded person would get all marital assets. I returned the prenup her father had sent me with a message saying no way, and sent the one I had created with a note stating, I will sign this one. I knew it would annoy him, so I awaited his reaction. When the call did not arrive the following day, I was startled. Then I got my mail, and the prenup ID mailed was returned, ripped into multiple pieces. I contacted Sophia's father, Edward, and chuckled, saying, I hadn't thought to shred the one he had sent me. I then told him I had a reasonable solution for both of us and proposed we meet with Sophia and my lawyer the following day. He arrived with his lawyer, and we met. They demanded alimony, which I strongly refused. They also wanted to eliminate the adultery and abuse provisions, but I held firm and refused. They insisted on safeguarding Sophia's assets, which I agreed to, but I made it plain that none of my premarital assets could be touched. After considerable deliberation, we ultimately reached an agreement that followed my initial idea. Sophia and I signed the forms and went back to organizing the wedding. I hoped that this was the end of the drama and that we could go on and begin our lives together. Unfortunately, this was not the case. As previously stated, I worked as a service technician and was periodically sent out of town for client concerns. About 2 weeks before the wedding, I had to depart for an issue that was supposed to be simple to address and just required an overnight stay. I assured Sophia I'd be back the next evening. She accepted and said that she would go to her parents' place the following day to discuss some last-minute plans with her mother. The problem at the customer's location was easily resolved. They need a line conditioner, which I had in my vehicle. I put it up and was done in less than 25 minutes. I could make it home before dark, so I stopped to get Sophia some flowers before driving to her place. When I arrived, I rang the doorbell, and she responded, dressed in a nightgown and robe with smeared lipstick. I gave her the flowers and asked if I may come inside. She hesitated, and just then, the same guy from dinner appeared around the corner, clad just in sports shorts, and inquired who I was. I grew furious. I informed the guy that I was Sophia's fiancé and inquired what was going on. She answered, nothing. I removed her engagement ring and informed her the wedding was off. I then told the guy she had been unfaithful. Sophia began weeping, but I just turned around and went. Later, Edward called and asked what had caused Sophia to weep. I described the scenario, informing him that he and his wife had gotten their desire. I realized she wasn't the proper person for me, therefore the wedding was cancelled. Edward responded that this was not what Sophia had stated. I told him that I knew he needed to protect his family, but I would never marry someone who had deceived me. I advised that he question Sophia about the guy who was practically nude in her flat when I was supposed to be out of town. Edward said Sophia had told him something different. I questioned him why she was spending time with another guy in her apartment when we were set to be married in just 3 weeks. He said that Sophia characterized him as a college acquaintance. I chuckled and questioned, if he's just a friend, why wasn't he dressed when he came to speak with me? Edward apologized and promised to investigate the problem. I told him to do what he needed to do, but I made it plain that I was not marrying Sophia under any conditions. I concluded our talk there. Sophia phoned many times, but I ignored each call, sending them to voicemail and deleting them without listening. I immediately contacted my father and told him to keep out of it since this was between Sophia and me. He said that if Sophia phoned her, she would speak with her, but she would not meddle further. I told him that, in spite of everything, I still loved him. We terminated our talk, and I went to bed. Sophia was sitting on the stairs of my house when I returned home from work the next day. She said we should chat. I said, no, we don't. You've made it clear how essential I am to you. We were engaged, and I caught you with another guy less than a month before our wedding. We will not be getting married. We won't be dating or talking after today. If you don't leave right now, you'll sell the home and relocate. Then you'll make sure no one we know knows where I am. I can't stand liars and cheaters. Unfortunately, I destroyed your little romance yesterday. Did it continue after I left? Was your other lover as good as I once was? Was it worthwhile to toss away all of your parents' plans? She began weeping again, but I just stepped past her and entered via the rear door since she was blocking the front. She rang the doorbell for around 5 minutes before departing. I hadn't heard from her in a few days, but then her mother surprised me by calling and urging me to reconsider. I described what had transpired and encouraged her to approach Sophia directly for the truth. I reiterated that the wedding was not going to happen. I said, "I'm sorry, but you must have been right when she asked." I said, "I'm clearly not good enough for your daughter." She demonstrated this to me by her actions. And just think, if she's pregnant, it's not mine. I heard a quick gasp, followed by silence as she hung up the phone. After a week, I was summoned into the office. My supervisor and the business owner told me that they had received an offer to sell the firm for a price that seemed too good to be true. I said, "Let me complete this meeting. Mr. Anderson wants the business, but I have to go immediately now." Thomas, the owner, confirmed that Mr. Anderson was indeed interested but added, "No, he does not require that you be dismissed. He genuinely asked me to ask you whether you wanted to work for him." I informed Thomas that I didn't think so, and that I'd decompose my resignation letter as soon as I returned to my computer. I also conveyed my dissatisfaction with Sophia's family and their deceptive tactics. I said that I had enough funds to last a few months, but that I would be selling my home and moving out of the city once it sold. I also informed Thomas that I would not be revealing my new location with anybody. Thomas appeared to understand and promised to give me a fantastic recommendation. I thanked him, then walked to my computer to compose the letter and gave it to him. He handed me my last paycheck, as well as an extra one, which he said was a bonus for being a fantastic employee. He recommended me to use his home phone number as a reference, since Mr. Anderson will take over next week. I urged him not to inform the new owner of my departure, allowing him to find out when he checked the payroll. In only 2 days, I had secured a new work barely 40 miles away. When my home sold via Mr. Anderson's realtor, I departed and did not return for more than 18 months. As my father's health started to deteriorate, I chose to relocate closer to Seattle. I purchased a beautiful ranch-style house with 4 bedrooms and moved my father in with me. We leased out his home, which helped with some of his medical bills. The renter added that a young lady had been attempting to find our new address. I made it plain to him that he should not share any information with her, and that if he was concerned about her conduct, he should call her father using the number from my former employment. My new work was comparable to what I had at Thomas' business, but after a year, I realized there was little opportunity for advancement. I had become dissatisfied with the lack of prospects for progress in the firm, so I started seeking for something more promising. Eventually, I saw a chance to invest in a firm that was making progress in the bank equipment sales and servicing sector. I was going to be in charge of customer service, and my colleague Daniel Carter would be in charge of sales. To my amazement, the bank agreed with my proposal and gave me a business loan to cover the remaining funds required to buy a 50% ownership in the firm. I worked hard in the field and eventually discovered a few of men who were competent and dedicated. They were also highly security conscious, so we decided to begin providing services like as combination changes and lock replacements. Business was going well, and on one of my calls, I bumped into Sophia, who was now a loan officer at a local bank. Her father had purchased the bank, and the issue was a sticky safe lock. It simply took me about 30 minutes to open the little safe, then another few minutes to install the new lock and set the combination. As we spoke, Sophia recognized she had made a terrible mistake and wanted to reconcile. I inquired whether she could verify her trustworthiness. She said she had learned her lesson and still loved me. I then inquired if she had ever informed her parents the truth, or whether I was still the villain in the narrative. She paused and answered, "Sort of." I stopped her and said, "Sophia, I still love you, but I won't be blamed for something I didn't do, particularly since you lied to your parents about it. Would you tell me the truth about what happened that night? I had some questions about what I witnessed." She nodded, her face a combination of dread and shame. She then said, "Yes, I'll answer honestly and won't hide anything from you. Can we stop chatting at work? Would you want to meet me in the restaurant down the block after your shift?" I agreed, and we scheduled a time. When I arrived, she was already present. I ordered coffee and sat in the rear, where she had reserved a booth. She offered me a little grin and attempted to apologize again, but I lifted my hand to stop her. I said, "Are you ready to answer my questions? I need comprehensive and honest responses. If I detect any hesitancy, incompleteness, or dishonesty, I will leave, and I will not see you again at work or outside of it. If you make me feel at ease with your responses, we can start over. That includes dating again and maybe even getting engaged someday. This is your one opportunity, so take it carefully." Shall I begin? She gave me a startled and irritated expression before softly saying, yes. My first inquiry was that the only time you cheated on me after we got engaged? She responded, no, but he was the only one, and it was only 2 other times. I followed up with, did you have sex with him that night or the other 2 times? Her response was simple yes. I posed the last question, will you tell your parents the truth about that person and how I caught you? She implored, I can't, please don't make me pick between informing them and letting you go. I finished my coffee, placed a $7 money on the table, and arose. As I walked away, I added, you've already made your decision. I told you I wanted honesty, yet you still make me the bad person. For the last time, farewell. She said, wait, and for some reason, I paused. I turned to face her, and she whispered regretfully, you'll tell them tonight. I said, that's not good enough. I took out my phone, gave it to her, and added, I have your father's work phone number. I'll call him, and you'll tell him right now, using my phone and calling. Then I'll phone your parents home, and when your mother answers, you'll inform her. Is this a deal? Okay, she said gently. I called her father's business phone, and when he answered, I identified myself and said that his daughter wanted to talk with him. I gave Sophia the phone and she started describing everything. She confessed to cheating on me, claiming that I caught her because I returned early. She also said that she wanted to clarify the situation and realized that Alexander was not the evil person. She apologized for lying but said she was mortified of being discovered. I returned my phone and began to walk away, but not before saying something loud enough for her to hear. I cannot believe that she is just embarrassed because she was caught and not guilty of the cheating itself. Your initial impression was correct, that I wasn't good enough for your daughter, since a promise is extremely important to me. I apologized for the way the discussion had gone, but explained that Sophia had wanted to start dating again, and I had recommended she tell him the truth. I hung up and left, but when I saw Sophia's vehicle following me, I went to the nearby library. I walked by the front entrance, and as soon as I saw her exit her vehicle, I snuck out the rear and drove home. Sophia was waiting for me when I got at the workplace the next day. I informed her, I've said all I was going to say to you. If you don't leave me alone, you'll file a stalking report with the police. She went, and I hadn't heard from her in a few weeks. Then our organization got a service call from her bank, and all of our technicians were on other assignments. I informed Daniel of the problem, so he contacted the management. After completing the conversation, he said, sorry, but it was a valid request. They got a carrier stuck in one of their drive-through tubes. I informed Daniel that I would accept the call, but if I had any problems with Sophia, I would sell my stake of the firm and leave. He glanced at me and remarked, God, you are so obstinate. Have you ever done something stupid? I replied, of course I did. My concern is that she not only did something dumb, dishonest, and shameful, but she also blamed me for the split. She had a chance to clear everything up last week, but all she admitted was that she was sorry she was caught. I paused and added, I learned before I was 10 years old that the punishment and embarrassment for making a mistake or doing something stupid does not last as long as being caught in a lie. I cleared the tube, and when I went to have the service ticket signed, the manager attempted to send me to Sophia for her signature. I responded, if you don't sign it, tell me someone else than Ms. Mitchell. Otherwise, I will return to my office with an unsigned ticket, and we will charge your bank anyhow. If you have a problem with it, we may utilize our 90-day cancellation policy, and you can choose another service provider. If you require an explanation for why I am taking this position, please contact Ms. Mitchell. I don't want to deal with her, even on a professional level. She signed it and said she'd report me to the owner. I said, I'm the owner. She just shook her head and said, you'll speak with Mr. Anderson. We may employ the 90-day clause. That'll be my advice. I agreed to that and departed, thinking, great, I've just cost the company business by being a jerk. When I returned to the office, I informed Daniel what had occurred, and he was angry. He promised that if he could acquire the money, he would buy me out. I was just as upset, so I provided him my bank's contact information. His jaw fell agape, and he hurriedly added, I can't operate this firm alone, and none of the technicians are ready to perform your work. Let's simply take you off the service call list, and you can handle it from here on out. I agreed to Daniel's idea, removed myself from the service roster, and went home. Later, Edward called and asked why I wouldn't deal with his daughter. After I explained everything to him, he agreed to move Sophia from the bank to one of his other enterprises. I informed him that this was unnecessary since I had already removed myself from the service roster and would no longer be calling on consumers. I added that if he still felt that anything needed to be done, he may utilize the 90-day provision. He said that he did not want to undertake it since all previous service groups had performed poorly. I apologized for my actions, recognizing that it was unprofessional, but stated that his daughter had pushed me over the brink. I apologized again, wished him well, and hung up the phone. About 6 months later, I was eating a steak with some friends at the local Outback when I saw Sophia stroll in with a group of folks I knew from the bank. She didn't see me at first, but when she sat down, our eyes connected. She offered a little nod before returning her focus to her companions. She seemed a bit forlorn. I exited the restaurant after my company had done eating and I had received my check. When I went home, I saw that I had a message on my home phone. Edward asked me to phone Sophia. He said that she was sad and did not eat or sleep consistently. I phoned Sophia's last known number, but there was no answer, so I left a message with my mobile phone number and asked her to call. Given what had occurred in the past, I also disabled my home phone's caller ID feature. My phone rang a few hours later, just as I was heading into bed. It was Edward, informing me that Sophia had fainted after leaving the restaurant and had been sent to the hospital. One of her group members had phoned 911, and she had been hospitalized for a battery of examinations. I found myself in a terrible situation. I still felt for her, but she had continually blamed me for the split. I told Edward, "You'll think about it tonight, and if I decide not to see her, he'll contact you. I can't make a decision right now." Despite my doubts, I went to visit her. Fortunately, her parents were present. Sophia seemed terrible, thin, with swollen eyes and a disturbed face. I welcomed everyone and then questioned Sophia about the difficulties her father had raised. Her reaction was emotional. "Because I love you and you dumped me, you've treated me terribly," she almost yelled. I asked her parents if we could go out into the hall and chat, and they agreed. "I think it's best if I leave now," I told him. "Sophia is really angry, but I've made it plain that I will not accept being with someone who cheated." I added, "The last time I phoned you, Edward, she was going to give you the whole story of the split. I was present, and the only thing she felt embarrassed about was being caught. I still love her, but I won't be able to contact her again until she takes responsibility for her actions. If this disappoints or bothers you both, I really apologize, but I need to prioritize my personal well-being. I hope that one day you will realize that I am not a horrible person, but rather an honest one. Goodbye." A few weeks later, Daniel approached me and said Mr. Anderson wanted to buy him out. I was taken aback and enraged. Daniel suggested that I have the right of first refusal. I asked him how much it would cost for me to purchase a stake. After he provided me the number, I phoned the bank, who agreed to retain the money. I also instructed Daniel to notify Mr. Anderson that I was now the sole owner of the firm. About 3 hours later, I got a call from Edward. He questioned why I had purchased Daniel's stake. I indicated that I could no longer work with him, and that if Mr. Anderson had bought Daniel's portion, he would most likely have included Sophia in the firm in some manner. I made it apparent that I couldn't work with Sophia. I then inquired if Sophia had altered or added anything to her story of our split. He said they had not asked. Frustrated, I said, "Now that I am the owner, I will legally activate the 90-day cancellation provision. The only other alternative is for you to buy me out." I immediately terminated the phone. I quickly contacted Daniel to give him an update on the situation. I also promised to sell him his stake for the sum I paid, less 3%, if Edward did not buy me out within 72 hours. Edward said, "Okay, I now realize that you will not be able to contact Sophia in any manner. I do not want to lose your company's exceptional service. I'll buy you out, but I do want a non-compete agreement." I firmly said, "No. If you buy me out, I will launch a new firm in 6 weeks. I'll offer you my non-negotiable pricing, and I'll promise in the sales agreements not to seek business from any of the firms you own. I will not try to recruit any personnel from your firm, but if they come to me for a position, I will hire them." Edward said tersely, "All right, what's your price?" I informed Edward how much it would take for him to buy me out. The sum I suggested was a 25% increase over what I paid Daniel for his stake, and it was double what Edward paid me for the firm. He agreed on the conditions. Things had gone well for about a year when I spotted a story in the business section indicating that my old employer was declaring bankruptcy. It came out that my new firm had acquired all of their customers except Mr. Anderson's bank. Edward contacted and offered to sell the firm back to me for the balance of its accounts payable, which was around 30% of what he had paid me for it. I accepted the offer and promised to uphold the original agreement with his bank. After everything was finalized, I became the only shareholder of an LLC specializing in bank equipment sales and servicing. I recruited Daniel as my vice president of sales. We both earned money, and the company continued to expand. Unfortunately, my father's health continued to deteriorate, so I arranged to employ a live-in home care assistant via an agency. Sophia found out about it and contacted my father to offer her services. Although I wasn't happy with the situation, Sophia and my father had always gotten along well, so I succumbed. Sophia, I must confess, was excellent for my father. When there was a problem, Sophia would immediately call the doctor, and as a consequence, my father's attitude changed and he became more happy. Over time, I found myself lured back to Sophia. I realized I'd never stopped loving her, but I also understood that without the ability to trust her again, there was no chance of rekindling our relationship. Sophia requested an extra night off after 10 months of this arrangement. She stated that she had a date and wanted to spend time alone. I said, of course. I'm delighted to see you're moving on. If this occurs again, please let me know, and I'll make plans if I can't be here. The night she went out, I realized I was envious. I tried but failed to suppress it. After she went, I roamed about the house, unable to concentrate on anything, until my father saw my behavior and chuckled. I knew it. You still adore that girl. When will you forgive her? I responded, I'll forgive her when she tells everyone that I wasn't the cause of our breakup, when I can trust her again, and when she is genuinely sorry for cheating, not just for getting caught, but only when she proves she deserves forgiveness. I told Sophia she could take a night off anytime she pleased, as long as she gave me 24 hours notice. She thanked me and told me she would not abuse the privilege. Sophia spent one night out every week for the following 3 weeks. One day, while out for lunch, I ran into one of her pals. I decided to ask Sophia whether she had revealed anything about the men she was dating. The reaction I received was a giggle, followed by, she has no new boyfriends. She's only trying to make you jealous. She spends such evenings out with me or one of her other friends and does not speak to any guys. That information piqued my interest in her sentiments. I discovered I still had strong emotions for her, which drove me to reflect about things for a few days. Eventually, I decided to see where things may go if we began dating again. About 2 weeks later, I sat down with Sophia and asked whether she had accepted the reality of our split. She said that she had. I then inquired whether she was prepared to tell her parents the whole narrative of what caused the split, to which she replied that she already had. I asked her if she was willing to start again, resuming the relationship from scratch. I made it obvious that there were certain rules we both had to observe. I underlined that in order for things to work between us, we both had to obey these guidelines. I laid out the ground rules clearly: no dates or sex with anyone else, company functions must allow spouse attendance to ensure both parties can attend, complete honesty about money, plans, and any social events, a prenuptial agreement that protects both my and her assets, and no marriage or even plans for marriage until I felt prepared. Sophia stared at me, startled, and questioned, "What made you so stubborn?" I laughed lightly and replied, "Oh, I'm not sure. Perhaps a fiancé is lying and cheating. Can you conceive of a reason why that would not bother me?" Her face became sorrowful as she answered, "Yeah, I deserve it. I am very sorry and saddened that my actions caused you to shift from the kind and loving person you once were." I said, "We wouldn't be having this talk if I didn't care. I care, and I still have strong emotions for you. But it doesn't mean I'll forget the pain." She seemed to understand, and after a moment of quiet reflection, she asked, "So, are we going to start dating again?" We did it, and within a year, we were engaged and married. Sophia was a stunning bride. Life was fantastic, work was booming, sales were increasing, and money was coming in. After we married, I hired a home health care business to help with my father's care. Sophia grumbled, but I explained to her that, although she had previously served as a backup plan, I wanted her to also care for me. Things started to go apart after a few years of marriage. Daniel chose to quit the firm, and Sophia started to withdraw emotionally. She began going out for ladies' evenings out, and our closeness dwindled. She started moaning about virtually everything. According to her, I wasn't successful enough, I wasn't socially involved enough, and I wasn't enough overall. I had had enough. I replied, either you get an attitude adjustment, or you get out. Unsurprisingly, she did not take it well. Sophia burst out weeping and slammed the bedroom door. Sophie had always wanted to wait to have children, which made me question if there was more to her conduct. I decided to look at this more. The following day, I went to the office and phoned the private investigative business we hired to do staff security checks. The investigator assigned to the case, John Chambers, indicated he could do a preliminary check in a day or two, but a more full examination would take a few weeks. I directed him to complete the preliminary report and continue the whole inquiry until my queries were addressed. John contacted me about a week and a half later with the news I had been waiting for. Sophia had been cheating. She was not only engaged with my old partner, Daniel Carter, but also with the guy from the dinner, whom I had previously caught her with. John had gathered obscene photographs, films, and audio recordings as proof. He advised me not to view or listen to the material since it was too raw. Instead, he advised that I give the DVD to my divorce counsel. I requested John to create 3 copies of the DVD. I wanted one for my attorney, one for Sophia's father, and one to store in my safe since I did not trust Sophia's relatives or friends not to delete the evidence. I also asked for 5 notarized copies of his written report. I spoke with numerous divorced friends to locate a respected attorney who would actively preserve my possessions. Wilson, Lopez, and Taylor came highly recommended, so I made an appointment. I collected all of the necessary financial and legal documentation for myself and my company and met with Laura Wilson as planned. I gave her my docs, the DVD, and the prenuptial agreement. She was pleased with my preparation and promised me that if the documentation confirmed what I had indicated, I would keep all of my assets and the money I had accumulated throughout the marriage. She also indicated that, given her own riches, she would probably have to pay me spousal maintenance, alimony. I told her to file for divorce and get a restraining order to keep Sophia from coming to my business, house, or contacting me. I mentioned that Sophia was often oblivious to her own flaws and would most likely try to retaliate. Furthermore, I planned to take legal action against both individuals involved, as well as Mr. Anderson's company, since Sophia and the other guy worked there. Laura, who insisted on being addressed by her first name, added, "Alex, he'll take care of everything you've requested, and he'll also find a method to ensure she is compelled to leave your house and have no contact with you unless it's via a lawyer or a court official. Do you know where she will be on Wednesday or Wednesday evening?" I said, yes, according to the written report, she sees Daniel on Wednesday afternoons and has 4-hour meals at her father's home. They do not return until around 4:45 p.m. to complete their workday. I'd prefer that she be served at her father's company office. Wednesday works for me. You're almost as vindictive as I am, she said. When Wednesday arrived, everything began to move. Sophia and her father were served, and my phone rang almost immediately. My secretary reported that I was not taking calls from either my wife or Mr. Anderson. She said that she was not recruited to become involved in my personal concerns. I asked her whether she liked her work. She said, yes, but I didn't sign up for this. I remained strong in my posture, saying, there's the door to my office. The outside access is 12 steps from that door. If you don't want to follow the instructions, don't allow the door strike you on the way out. You know you're just supposed to tell those 2 and the ones I listed to contact my attorney. If you can't manage it, search for another job. She began crying and said, I'm sorry. I'm simply so furious that you're mad at me for forgetting about the attorney who handled the urgent problem. But it did not resolve all of the fundamental concerns. Sophia, as predicted, filed a countersuit seeking 50% of all my assets. Laura chuckled and recommended me to put all of my non-business assets in an escrow account. She also indicated that she had spoken with Mr. Anderson's corporate counsel, who was proposing a settlement. When I heard the sum, I couldn't stop laughing. Tell the attorney that he'll settle for 15% of the business, Sophia and the other individual will be dismissed for reason, and Sophia will sign the papers as provided to her. He'll tell them to come back with any offer that saves him, and he'll turn it down right away, but he'll settle for Sophia's signature on the paperwork, $11.5 million, and his firing. And, of course, they must pay all of your fees, so charge what you need. That is what finally occurred. Then, when my father died, things took a turn for the worst, culminating in the moment I spotted the police cruiser. Daniel seemed disappointed, guilty, and practically in tears. He released his end of the safe, leading Sophia to release her grasp as well. She ended up trapping her foot beneath the safe, and I heard the bone crack from a few feet away. She shouted, but it sounded more angry than painful. Then she cried, "You must wreck everything. Why couldn't you wait until tomorrow to come?" I was surprised at first, but then rage took over and I became perfectly calm. Through clenched teeth, I snarled, "Officer, I want these 2 arrested for any charge you can bring." I'd want a court official or police to go inside and inspect the cabin for damage and make a note of anything missing. You notice the cut lock on the gate. This woman, my ex-wife, has no right to the property or its contents. I have the deed transfer documents in my vehicle, and her name is not on them. The police then arrested Daniel and Sophia, handcuffing them both before calling for an ambulance. He then requested me to accompany him while the crime scene technicians completed their job. We proceeded to a neighborhood cafe, and the officer remarked that he had previously dealt with my grandpa and considered him to be respectable and trustworthy. He also said that the sheriff's department had been monitoring the gate since they knew the cabin was unoccupied. After the crime scene investigators concluded their investigation, Daniel and Sophia were charged with conspiracy to commit arson. They had brought a stack of newspapers and a little candle, put the newspapers in the main section of the cabin, and placed the candle on top. If the candle had gone through, the cabin would have caught fire before anybody could put it out. Everything Daniel and Sophia had stolen was recovered, the cabin was rebuilt, and charges were formally filed. Daniel pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 7 to 10 years in jail. Mr. Anderson arranged for a psychiatrist to evaluate Sophia, and she was admitted to a private mental facility. She still had ongoing charges that would need to be resolved before she could be released. Sophia was found to be pregnant while in the hospital. The newborn boy was born there and put with his grandparents. I was not the father, and after insisting on a DNA test, it was discovered that neither Daniel nor the other guy was the real father. Despite everything, I cared for Sophia, but I recognized that life had to move on, and I didn't want the agony and hassles anymore. Thank you for watching. Share your ideas in the comments, and remember to like, share, and subscribe.